I looked through the frosted glass of that apartment window, the kind of window that's supposed to show you a quiet street or a peaceful snowfall, but instead, it showed me the death of my marriage. I saw my husband's son, Greg, running through the slush, and then I saw her, Amber, the woman who had been a ghost in our relationship since the day I said I do. Seeing them there, in a place my husband told me was vacant, was like a physical blow to the chest. How do you react when you realize you aren't the leading lady in your own life, but just a supporting character in someone else's secret family? By the time I figured out the depth of the lies, I wasn't just fighting for my sanity, I was fighting for my life. I was pregnant, trapped in a car with a man who was losing his mind, watching him point a weapon at himself and scream that I was the reason everything was falling apart. But before we get to the breaking point, before the snow, the screams, and the weapon, you have to understand how I let myself get replaced in my own home. I'm 23 now. When I married my husband, let's call him Mark, I was barely 20. I was young, full of that specific kind of optimism that makes you think love can solve any logistical nightmare. Mark was 24 then, charming, a bit of a fixer type, or so I thought. He had a son, Greg, from a previous relationship with Amber. I knew that going in. I wasn't one of those women who wanted to erase a man's past. I wanted to be part of his future. I wanted to be the cool wife, the understanding one, the one who could handle a blended family situation with grace and maturity. I thought if I was supportive enough, if I was kind enough to his ex, that we could all just be a family. For the first couple of years, it was okay. We had our own space, our own rhythm, but then came March of 2024. We had just moved into a new place, a fresh start. We'd been married for almost 3 years, and for the first month, it felt like we were finally building the foundation I dreamed of. Then, the phone calls started. It's funny how a crisis always seems to happen right when you're finally finding your footing. Amber's car engine blew. Just like that, she was stranded. Without a car, she couldn't get to work. Without work, she couldn't pay her rent. Within weeks, she was facing eviction. Mark came to me, his face etched with that specific brand of hero concern he gets. He told me she was planning to pack up Greg and move to Florida to live with her father. I can't let him go that far away, Mark told me, his voice cracking. Greg is 7. If they move to Florida, I'll never see him. He'll grow up not knowing his father. What was I supposed to say to that? I looked at the man I loved, saw the pain of a father potentially losing his son, and I felt for him. My heart ached for the little boy who would be uprooted. So, I did the thing that I would come to regret every single day for the next year. I suggested she stay with us. We have the spare bedroom, I said. It felt like the right thing to do. It felt like the big person move. She can stay there until she gets on her feet. Just a few months. Until she gets a new car and a new place. Mark hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. He called me an angel. He told me he was the luckiest man in the world to have a wife as selfless as me. And for about 48 hours, I believed him. Then, Amber moved in. She didn't come in with gratitude. She didn't come in looking like a woman who had just been saved from homelessness. She moved in like she was reclaiming territory. Within the first week, the spare bedroom wasn't a guest room anymore. It was a base of operations. The house started to smell like her perfume, a cloying, sweet scent that seemed to cling to the walls. She didn't help with chores. She didn't offer to pay for groceries. Instead, she spent her time talking. And oh, could she talk. She was a master of the he said, she said game. She would wait until Mark was in the shower or out for a cigarette, and she'd lean against the kitchen counter, watching me cook. You know, she'd say, her voice low and conspiratorial. Mark told me the other night that he really misses how things used to be, before all the pressure of a new marriage. He says he feels like he can finally breathe now that I'm here to help with Greg. I'd feel a prickle of heat crawl up my neck. I'm sure he's just glad Greg is close by, Amber. Maybe, she'd smirk, But he also said he finds it hard to talk to you about the real stuff. You're so young, you know? You don't really get what it's like to have a history with someone. I tried to ignore it. I tried to tell myself she was just insecure, trying to find her place. But then I'd catch them in the living room, whispering. The second I'd walk into the room, the silence would be deafening. They'd pull apart, Mark looking guilty, Amber looking triumphant. When I would confront Mark about it, he'd turn it back on me. You're being paranoid, he'd say, his voice rising. She's the mother of my child and she's going through a hard time. Why are you making this about you? I thought you were on my side. That was the phrase he used to keep me in line. I thought you were on my side. By the 2-month mark, I was a shell of myself. I was living in a house where I felt like an intruder. I was the one paying the bills, the one doing the laundry, and yet I was the one being treated like the crazy third wheel. I couldn't handle the whispers anymore. I couldn't handle the way she looked at my husband, or the way he looked everywhere but at me. So, I made a choice. I told Mark we had to move. I told him I couldn't live like this. I expected him to tell her it was time to leave. I expected him to prioritize our marriage. Instead, he suggested something that felt like a compromise, but was actually a white flag. He said we would move into my parents' house to save money, and Amber would move in with a friend of hers. We left. We went to my parents, and for a few months, I breathed. I thought the nightmare was over. I thought we had escaped. But Amber was like a weed. You could cut her down, but the roots were still deep in the soil of my husband's life. A few months later, we found a new place of our own. I was hopeful again. We were away from the drama. But then, the phone calls started again. This time, Amber was in trouble because her friend, the one she was living with, had lost her fiancé in a tragic accident at work. The friend was grieving. She was cold. She was mean to Amber. According to Amber, she was being threatened with being kicked out onto the street. I remember sitting on our new sofa, watching Mark's face as he listened to her cry on the speakerphone. I saw the hero look coming back. My stomach did a slow, painful flip. She has nowhere else to go, Mark whispered, looking at me with those pleading eyes. Just until she finds a place. I can't have my son living in a house with a woman who hates them. Please, for Greg. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that his son was a shield he used whenever he wanted to get his way. But I looked at him, and I saw the man I'd married, and I thought, maybe this time will be different. Maybe she's learned her lesson. She hadn't. She moved in, and this time, she stayed for 8 months. 8 months of my husband and I fighting every single night. 8 months of her undermining every decision I made. 8 months of feeling like I was the other woman in my own home. It got so bad that we eventually gave up our apartment again and moved back to my parents' house. We were stuck in this cycle, trying to build a life, having Amber tear it down, and retreating to my parents to lick our wounds. While we were living at my parents' this last time, Mark got a new job. He became the maintenance supervisor at a large apartment complex. It was a good job. High pay, big responsibilities. I thought, this is it. This is the turning point. I started begging him. I told him, Mark, please, we are at my parents' house. We need our own life. Put me first. Put our future child first. Because by then, I was pregnant. I was carrying his daughter, and I was desperate for a home that felt safe. I told him I felt like I was in second place. I told him I didn't trust the buddy-buddy relationship he had with Amber. He promised me. He looked me in the eye and swore that he was done with the drama. He said he was working extra hours to get us a place of our own. Then, the snow came. A few weeks ago, a massive storm hit. Mark's boss wanted him on site in case of emergencies, so he told me we were going to stay in one of the furnished, vacant units at the complex for the weekend. It felt like a little getaway, a chance to be together. I was standing by the window, watching the snow blanket the parking lot, feeling a rare moment of peace. That's when I saw the movement. A small figure in a bright blue jacket. Greg. I recognized his run anywhere, and right behind him walking with a bag of groceries like she owned the place, was Amber. They didn't walk past the building. They walked straight to the door of the unit directly across the courtyard. They went inside. They had keys. The world tilted. The vacant apartments weren't vacant. My husband had been lying to me for 2 months. He hadn't been working extra hours to save for our future. He had been setting up a life for them, right under my nose, while I was living out of a suitcase at my parents' house, pregnant and praying for a home. The silence in that furnished apartment was heavier than the snow piling up outside. I stood there, my hand resting on the swell of my stomach, feeling my daughter kick, and I wondered if she could feel my heart shattering. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just watched that door across the courtyard, the door Amber and Greg had just walked through, and I waited. I waited for the sound of Mark's boots in the hallway. I waited for the sound of his key in the lock. When he finally walked in, he was smiling. He had a bag of takeout in his hand, looking like the picture of a doting husband taking care of his pregnant wife during a storm. "Hey babe," he said, his voice casual, warm. "I got those tacos you like. The roads are getting pretty bad out there." I didn't turn around. I just kept staring at the unit across the way. "Mark," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else, someone older, someone colder. "Why are Amber and Greg in Unit 4B? The silence that followed was visceral. I heard the rustle of the paper bag as his grip tightened. I heard him take a breath, a sharp, hitching sound. For a long 10 seconds, neither of us said a word. "What are you talking about?" he finally asked. But the bravado was gone. His voice was thin, reeking of a man who had just been cornered. I turned then. I looked him dead in the eye, and I saw the shift. The hero mask was slipping, and underneath it was something panicked and ugly. "I just saw them, Mark. I saw Greg in his blue jacket. I saw Amber with groceries. They have keys. They're living there, aren't they?" He dropped the bag of food on the counter. He didn't even try to deny it for more than a second. He just slumped. "It's not what you think," he started. "It never is it? It's never what you think. It's always some complicated, convoluted web of excuses that's supposed to make the betrayal feel like a favor." "Then tell me what it is," I said, my voice rising. "Tell me why I've been living in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house for months, begging you to find us a place, while you've been setting up a home for your ex-girlfriend, right across from your office. Tell me why I'm the wife, but she's the one with the apartment." He started pacing, his hands flying through the air. "Greg got expelled, okay? For truancy. Amber couldn't keep him in school and the state was getting involved. They were going to lose him and she had nowhere to go after the friend kicked her out. She was going to take him and run, and I couldn't let that happen. I'm the maintenance supervisor here. I have pull. I got her into that unit so I could keep an eye on Greg, so I could make sure he actually gets to school." "And you didn't think to tell me?" I asked, a sob finally breaking through. "You lied to me for 2 months? Every morning when you left my parents' house, you weren't just going to work. You were going to them. You were playing house with them while I was waiting for a text back." "I didn't want to stress you out," he yelled back, his face turning that mottled red color I had grown to fear. "You're pregnant. You're always on my back about her, and I knew if I told you, you'd blow up. I did this for my son. Don't you get that? I'm being a father." That was the knife in the gut. I'm being a father. He used his son as a human shield against any accountability. If I was mad, I was anti-child. If I was hurt, I was selfish. He had spent months gaslighting me into believing that we were broke, that the market was tough, that we just needed a little more time at my parents' house. All while he was signing a lease for the woman who had spent the last 3 years trying to dismantle our marriage. I felt like I was losing my mind. I looked at the man I had married, the man who was supposed to be my protector, and I realized I didn't know him at all. He had created a parallel life. He had a family at my parents' house, and he had a family at the apartment complex. And somehow, in both of those lives, I was the one on the outside looking in. "I want to separate," I said. It came out as a whisper, but it felt like an earthquake. Mark stops pacing. His eyes went wide, but not with sadness. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. You're going to walk away from your marriage because I helped my son? After everything I've done for you? You're going to be a single mom because you're jealous of a 7-year-old? I'm not jealous of a child, Mark. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with being second place. I'm done with you choosing her over me every single time she cries wolf. I grabbed my coat. I didn't care about the snow. I didn't care that the roads were dangerous. I just had to get out of that furnished unit that felt more like a prison cell than a getaway. As I walked toward the door, he grabbed my arm. Not gently. You aren't going anywhere, he hissed. We're staying here for the weekend. My boss expects me here. Then stay here, I said, wrenching my arm away. But I'm going home to my parents, and this time, you aren't coming with me. The drive back was a blur of white snow and hot tears. When I got to my parents' house, I walked through the door and just collapsed. My sister Sarah was the first one to get to me. She's always hated Mark. She saw through his hero act from day one. She'd seen the way he talked down to me, the way he made me feel small. When I told her what I saw at the apartments, she didn't even look surprised. She just looked angry. He's a monster, Jen, she said, holding me as I shook. He's been playing you. He's been using that baby to keep you in line while he does whatever he wants with Amber. You can't go back. Not this time. But Mark wasn't going to let go that easily. For the next few days, my phone was a weapon. He sent hundreds of texts. They went from, I'm so sorry, I love you, to you're a heartless bitch for trying to take my daughter away from me. He called my parents' house at all hours. He showed up at the door, begging my father to let him in, crying about how he just wanted his family back together. And that's the thing about a manipulator. They know exactly which buttons to press. He knew I wanted a family. He knew I wanted my daughter to have a father. He started sending me photos of baby clothes he'd bought, ultrasound pictures with captions like, she deserves a home with both of us. I was weak. I was pregnant, hormonal, and terrified of being alone. I started to wonder, was I the asshole? Was I being too hard on him? He was just trying to help his son, right? Maybe I was just being the jealous wife. My family told me I was crazy for even considering taking him back, but they didn't have his voice in their ear every night, promising the world. Against everyone's advice, I agreed to meet him. I told myself it was just to talk, just to see if there was any shred of truth in his apologies. He picked me up in his car. I was about 7 months pregnant then, my stomach heavy, my back aching. I just wanted peace. But peace wasn't on the menu. As soon as I got in the car, the energy changed. He wasn't the apologetic, crying man from the phone. He was cold. He was vibrating with a nervous, jagged energy. He started driving, and he didn't head toward a restaurant or a park. He headed toward the highway. Mark, where are we going? I asked, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. We're going to talk, he said, his voice low and dangerous. We're going to talk until you understand that you're ruining this family. You're the reason Greg is struggling. You're the reason I'm stressed. You and your needs. You and your boundaries. He started accelerating. 60, 70, 80. The car began to fishtail slightly on the damp pavement. Mark, slow down, I said, my heart starting to hammer against my ribs. Please, think about the baby. The baby? He laughed. And it was a sound I will never forget. It was hollow and sharp. You don't care about the baby. If you did, you'd stop trying to leave me. You're the one putting her in danger by breaking up this home. He swerved suddenly, the tires screaming. I screamed, clutching the door handle. Stop it, Mark, stop the car. Why? He yelled, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. You want to leave? Fine. Maybe we should just end it all right now. Is that what you want? To be free of me? He veered toward the median, the concrete barrier rushing toward us at a terrifying speed. I was certain in that moment that I was going to die. I was certain that he was going to kill me, himself, and our unborn daughter just to prove a point. just to keep me from leaving. "Stop!" I shrieked, my voice raw. I'll stay, just please, stop the car." He slammed on the brakes so hard, the seatbelt cut into my chest. We skidded to a halt on the shoulder of the highway, the car rocking on its suspension. For a moment, there was only the sound of our ragged breathing and the ticking of the cooling engine. I thought the horror was over. I thought he'd had his outburst and it was done. But then, he reached into the glove box. The glove box clicked open, a sound that felt like a gunshot in the silence of the car. My breath hitched, my hands still white-knuckled around the door handle. I thought he was reaching for a cigarette, maybe a phone, anything to break the tension he'd just created by nearly driving us into a concrete barrier. But when his hand came out, he wasn't holding a phone. It was heavy, dark, metallic. My brain didn't want to process what I was seeing, even as he raised it. I didn't have time to think about the logistics or the legality. I just saw the barrel of a weapon pressed firmly against his own temple. "Is this what you want?" he screamed, his voice cracking, sounding like a wounded animal. "You want me gone? You want to be a single mom so bad? Fine, let's just end it. I can't live without my family, and if you're leaving, I have nothing." The scream that ripped out of my throat was primal. I wasn't a wife in that moment. I was a mother, protecting her unborn child from the blast radius of a madman. "Mark, no! Put it down! Please, just put it down!" "Why should I?" he sobbed, his finger twitching near the trigger. "You've already decided I'm the villain. You've already decided I'm trash. Everyone hates me. Your sister, your parents, and now you. I do everything for you and Greg and this baby, and it's never enough." In that small, cramped space of the car, the air felt like it had been sucked out. I could smell the ozone, the old upholstery, and the sharp, metallic scent of the weapon. I didn't think. I couldn't afford to. If he pulled that trigger, the car would become a tomb for all three of us. I lunged across the center console. At 7 months pregnant, I wasn't fast, and I wasn't graceful. My stomach hit the gear shift, a sharp pain blooming in my abdomen, but I didn't care. I grabbed his wrist with both hands, using every ounce of strength I had left. "Give it to me!" I shrieked. "Mark, give it to me right now!" We wrestled in the front seat, a clumsy, terrifying dance of limbs in desperation. He was stronger, but he was hysterical, his grip slipping as he wept. I felt the cold metal against my palm as I tried to pry his fingers away. It felt like hours, but it was probably only seconds before I managed to wrench it out of his hand. I threw the weapon into the back seat, as far away from him as I could reach. Then, I did the only thing I could do. I screamed at him to get out. "Get out of the car! Get out! Get out!" He looked at me, his eyes bloodshot, his face wet with tears and snot. He looked pathetic. Not like a hero, not like a father, just a broken, dangerous man who had used my life and our daughter's life as a bargaining chip to keep me from leaving. He opened the door and stumbled out onto the shoulder of the highway. I watched him through the windshield as he collapsed onto his knees in the dirt, his head in his hands, howling into the wind. I sat there, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering, my hands over my belly. "Are you okay?" I whispered to the baby. "Please, be okay." Eventually, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, hollow numbness. He stayed outside for 20 minutes. I didn't leave. I couldn't drive. I was too far gone into shock. I just sat there, watching him, wondering how this was my life. How I had gone from a hopeful 20-year-old bride to a woman wrestling a weapon away from her husband on the side of a highway. When he finally came back to the car, he was different. The rage was gone, replaced by that terrifying, hollow calm that always followed his outbursts. He didn't look at me. He just got in, started the engine, and drove us back to my parents' house in total silence. I walked into the house, walked past my mother who was asking where we'd been, and went straight to the bathroom. I locked the door and threw up until there was nothing left. For the next few days, I didn't speak. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that barrier coming toward the car. I saw the weapon. I felt the cold metal. My family knew something had happened, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the full truth yet. I was ashamed. I was the one who had chosen him. I was the one who had let Amber back in. I felt like I had failed my daughter before she was even born. But Mark was already on his redemption tour. He started texting me again, but the tone had shifted. He was no longer the aggressor. Now, he was the broken man seeking help. I realize now that everything I did was wrong, he wrote. I was under so much pressure with the job and Greg's school and trying to keep everyone happy. I had a mental breakdown. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted you to see how much I need you. Please, give me one more chance to be the man you deserve. I'll go to therapy. I'll do whatever it takes. And then he brought up the apartment again. I've talked to Amber, he claimed. I told her she has to find another place as soon as her lease is up. I'm putting you and the baby first now, I promise. But here was the thing. The lie was still there. He was still working at that complex. Amber was still living in that unit, and I was still in my parents' guest room. My sister, Sarah, finally cornered me in the kitchen. She'd seen the bruises on my arms from where he'd grabbed me during the struggle for the weapon. She didn't ask what happened. She told me. He tried to kill you, didn't he? She asked, her voice steady but her eyes blazing. I looked down at my tea, the steam rising in my face. He was having a breakdown, Sarah. He didn't mean it. Jen, stop it, she snapped. Stop making excuses for a man who uses your life as a threat. He lied to you for months about where his ex was living. He let you live here while he paid for her apartment. And then, when you finally stood up for yourself, he tried to take you out with him. That isn't a breakdown. That's abuse. He says he understands now, I whispered, though even to my own ears it sounded weak. He says he wants another chance. They always say that, Sarah said, leaning across the table. They say it right up until they actually do it. Look at me. Do you want our daughter to grow up thinking this is what love looks like? Do you want her to see her mother being called names, being lied to, being threatened? Because she will see it. She'll see it all. That was the moment the fog started to lift. I thought about Greg. I thought about that 7-year-old boy who was being raised in the middle of this chaos. He was already getting expelled for truancy. He was already seeing his father play 2 women against each other. Was that what I wanted for my little girl? I started looking back at the last 3 years with fresh eyes. I realized that the baby mama drama wasn't something that happened to Mark. It was something he created. He liked being the center of the storm. He liked having 2 women fight over him. He liked being the hero who saved Amber from homelessness and the victim who was just trying to be a good dad to me. He had built a house of cards, and he was mad at me for blowing on it. A few days later, I found out the biggest lie of all. I was talking to a mutual friend who also lived at the apartment complex. I didn't tell her everything. I just mentioned that I was glad Mark was helping Amber get her life together. The friend looked at me with genuine confusion. Helping her? Jen, they've been telling everyone at the complex that they're back together. They go to the pool together with Greg. Everyone thinks you guys divorced months ago. The air left my lungs. He hadn't just gotten her an apartment. He was living a completely separate life as a family man with her, while coming home to me at night and pretending he was working late to save for our future. He wasn't choosing between us. He was keeping both of us on the hook, using my pregnancy to keep me trapped, and using Amber's desperation to keep her compliant. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. The "am I the asshole" question finally had an answer. I wasn't the asshole for wanting space. I wasn't the asshole for feeling second place. I was the wife who had been systematically erased from her own marriage. But I still had to face him. He was still calling. He was still begging. And he was still the maintenance supervisor at the place where his other life was currently being lived. I knew I couldn't just walk away quietly. Not after the car. Not after the weapon. I needed to make sure he could never do this to me again. The realization that Mark was telling the entire apartment complex, his coworkers, his neighbors, his boss, that he and Amber were a couple while I was at home carrying his child was the final snap. It wasn't just a lie anymore. It was an alternate reality. I had been living in a ghost story, haunted by a woman who wasn't even hiding. She was right there, in the light, while I was being kept in the dark. I didn't call him. I didn't text him. I didn't give him another chance to spin a web of words around me. Instead, I asked my sister Sarah to drive me back to that apartment complex. I needed to see it for myself. Not through a frosted window during a snowstorm, but in the cold, hard light of day. When we pulled into the parking lot, I saw his work truck parked right in front of Amber's unit. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday. He should have been doing repairs or checking boilers. Instead, the front door to Unit 4B was wide open. "Stay in the car," I told Sarah. My voice was steady, a strange contrast to the hurricane of emotions inside my chest. "Jen, don't," she warned, her hand on my arm. "He's dangerous. You remember the car. You remember the weapon." "I remember," I said. And for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid. I was hollow. And there is nothing more dangerous than a woman who has nothing left to lose. But I'm not going in there to argue. I'm going in there to witness. I walked up the stairs, my heart rhythmically thumping against my ribs. As I reached the landing, I heard laughter. It was Greg. He was playing a video game, the familiar sounds of beeps and explosions drifting out into the hallway. And then I heard Mark's voice. "I told you, I'll get the groceries after my shift," he was saying. He sounded happy. He sounded relaxed. He sounded like the man I thought I had married. But he was giving that version of himself to someone else. I stepped into the doorway. The scene was domestic. Amber was sitting at the small dining table, a cup of coffee in her hand. Mark was leaning against the kitchen counter, his work uniform slightly rumpled. They looked like a family. They looked like they belonged. When Mark saw me, the color drained from his face so fast it was almost comical. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Jen?" he stammered, his hands dropping to his sides. What are you doing here?" Amber didn't look shocked. She looked annoyed. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. "Oh, look," she said, her voice dripping with that same sweet poison I'd heard so many times before. "The legal wife is here. Come to cause another scene?" I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes on Mark. "Our friend Sarah says everyone here thinks you two are together," I said, my voice echoing in the small room. "She says you've been telling people we're divorced, that you moved Amber in here so you could be a family again." Mark took a step toward me, his hands out in a pleading gesture. "Jen, listen, it's not like that. I had to tell the office something to get her the unit. It's just a cover. I'm doing this for us, so I can keep my job and provide for the baby." "Stop," I said. The word was like a physical barrier. "The baby is the only reason I haven't called the police about what happened in the car. But I'm done with the covers. I'm done with the lies. You aren't providing for us, Mark. You're providing for her, with the money that should be going toward a home for your daughter." "You're being hysterical again," Amber chimed in, standing up. "Mark, tell her. Tell her how you said you were only staying with her because of the pregnancy. Tell her how you told me you can't stand her family." Mark looked back and forth between us, the hero trap finally closing on him. He couldn't play both sides anymore. He was trapped in a room with the two lives he'd tried to keep separate, and the walls were closing in. "Shut up, Amber," he snapped. Then he turned to me, his eyes wide and frantic. "Jen, please. Let's go outside. Let's talk about this. I love you. I want to be with you. She's just here for Greg." "No," I said. "She's here because you want her here. You want to be the big man who takes care of everyone, but you're just a coward who can't tell the truth to anyone. You're a maintenance supervisor, Mark. You're supposed to fix things, but you've broken everything." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my shoulder. It wasn't the violent grip from the car, but it was desperate. "You can't just walk away. We have a lease. We have a life." "No," I said, shaking him off. "You have a lease with her. You have a life with her. My life is starting somewhere else. somewhere without you. I walked back to the car where Sarah was waiting, her phone in her hand, ready to call 911. I got in, closed the door, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. The air didn't smell like Amber's perfume. It didn't feel heavy with the weight of Mark's secrets. But the battle wasn't over. Not by a long shot. When a man like Mark loses his grip on his carefully constructed reality, he doesn't just go away quietly. He becomes a wrecking ball. Over the next week, the redemption texts stopped. They were replaced by something much darker. He started calling my parents' house, telling them that I was the one who had a mental breakdown. He told them I was unstable and that he was worried about the baby's safety in my care. He even called the police for a wellness check on me, claiming I had threatened to hurt myself. I sat on the sofa as 2 police officers stood in my parents' living room, looking at my pregnant belly and my calm, tear-streaked face. "I'm fine, officers," I told them. "I'm just going through a divorce." "Your husband seemed very concerned," one of them said, looking around. "He said you've been acting erratic." "Did he mention the time he nearly drove us into a concrete barrier last week?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Did he mention the weapon he pointed at his own head to keep me from leaving him?" The officers' expressions changed instantly. They took a report. They advised me on how to file for a temporary restraining order. For the first time, I had a paper trail. For the first time, the he said, she said was becoming he said, the police recorded. But then came the final blow from the apartment complex. I got a call from Mark's boss. He sounded uncomfortable, clearing his throat several times before speaking. "Jennifer, I'm so sorry to call you about this, but there's been an incident at the complex. Mark, he's been let go." "What happened?" I asked, though a part of me already knew. "He got into a physical altercation with one of the tenants," the boss said, "and we found out that he had unauthorized occupants in Unit 4B. He was bypassing the system, Jen. He was using company funds to cover the utilities and part of the rent for that unit. He told us she was a relative in need, but when we looked into it, it was much more complicated than that." Mark had lost everything. His job, his housing, his quote-unquote hero status. And who do you think he blamed? Not himself. Not Amber. He blamed me. He showed up at my parents' house at 2 a.m, screaming in the driveway. He was drunk, his voice raw and unrecognizable. He was calling me every name in the book, accusing me of ruining his career and taking his son away. My father went to the door, but I stopped him. "Don't," I said. "Just call the police. Let the system handle him now. He isn't my husband anymore. He's just a stranger with a loud voice." As I watched the flashing blue and red lights pull into the driveway from my bedroom window, I felt a strange sense of grief. Not for the man screaming in the yard, but for the girl I used to be. The girl who thought she could fix a broken man with enough patience and understanding. The girl who thought love meant being second place to a lie. I looked at my daughter's nursery, which my sister and I had finally started painting. It was a soft, peaceful green. There were no ghosts here, no cloying perfume, no secrets. Mark was taken away in handcuffs that night. It was the last time I saw him in person. The divorce moved quickly after that, fueled by the police reports and the testimony from his former employer. He lost his rights to the apartment, and Amber, without Mark's protection or his paycheck, was finally evicted. I don't know where she went. Florida, maybe. Or maybe she found another hero to manipulate. I'm 23 now, and I'm a single mother to a beautiful, healthy baby girl. Looking back, I realized that I wasn't the asshole for wanting to be first. I wasn't jealous or hysterical. I was a woman whose instincts were screaming the truth at her, while the person she loved most was trying to silence them. The road hasn't been easy. There are nights when the trauma of that car ride flashes back, or when I worry about how I'll explain all of this to my daughter one day. But then I look at her, sleeping peacefully in a home that is safe, and I know I made the right choice. I didn't just save myself that day on the highway. I saved her. So, if you're listening to this and you feel like you're in second place in your own life, if you feel like you're being gaslit into believing that your partner's loyalty to someone else is a virtue you should just accept, trust your gut. You aren't crazy. You aren't the asshole. You're just in the way of a lie that's waiting to be told. What would you have done if you saw your husband's other family through that window? Would you have stayed for the child? Or would you have walked away the moment the lies started? Let me know in the comments below. Your stories might help someone else realize they aren't alone. And if you want to hear more stories of people finding the strength to walk away from the darkness, don't forget to subscribe.